Right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Soul Series podcast. I'm your host, Lisa. I am a professional psychic medium, and I am also a licensed clinical social worker, AKA a therapist. I have been working in private practice for over 20 years. And although I was born a medium, I have been working professionally as one for the past decade. On today's show, we're going to be talking about paranormal psychotherapy with my guest, Dr. Darin.Wallis. So a little bit
Hello.
about Dr. Darin. Hello. A little bit about Dr. Darin is he is a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and a certified addiction counselor working with families since 1996. He is the former president of the Colorado Association of Marriage and Family Therapy and served on the National Board of Directors with the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. Dr. Darin holds several teaching positions at various institutions at the graduate, postgraduate, and doctoral levels, teaching and supervising students in marriage and family therapy. His therapy practice includes working with individuals, but mostly with couples and families with a variety of relational, emotional, behavioral, spiritual, and substance abuse problems. This family therapy work includes working with the paranormal, which Dr. Darin has been specializing in since 2002. Dr. Darin is the owner of the Colorado Center for Couples and Family Therapy and is the host of the podcast show Paranormal Family Therapy. Welcome, Dr. Darin.
Thank you so much for having me. I
It's
really
so good to
appreciate
see
it.
you.
I've been excited about hearing what you have to say and what you're going to ask me and what am I going to say.
This is going to be a great talk. So,
Uh,
reading your bio, it's very traditional. It's
mhm.
very, very traditional. So, can you tell us how did you get into the paranormal world? How did you end up working with the paranormal?
Yeah. So I really, in my professional work as a marriage and family therapist, licensed clinical social worker, I really just fell into it. So I went and got my master's degree, and then did a 2-year post-grad program in marriage and family therapy at a place called Denver Family Institute. And uh, one of my first families that I worked with them for about 5 or 6 weeks and made some progress with them. They were struggling with mistrust and not being able to get along with each other. A lot of arguing, a lot of tension in the house,
Yeah.
and we were starting to make some progress. And they trusted me. So after about 5 or 6 weeks, they said, the dad said, "Look, we like you. You're a funny guy. We like coming to see you. We trust you. We're going to tell you the real reason why we're here now." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, what is it?" He said, "Well, we have our house is haunted." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I haven't heard that one before."
Yeah.
And then we just kept working, and what became part of our dialogue was the haunting. And then we kept working at the trust issues. I began staffing those cases with my supervisor, who had the same reaction I did. I was like, "Yeah, this family, you remember this family that we've been talking about? Oh yeah. Well, it turns out their house is haunted." And my supervisor, Dave Blair, was like, "What do you mean, like ghosts?" And I said, "Yeah."
Mhm.
He's like, "Okay, well, I hadn't heard that one before." He said almost the exact same thing as I did, but we just staffed those cases exactly the same as we did any other case. And then that's how I came to do this, is that even though the content was different, there was a ghost in the house or some kind of um, energy or negative spirit or whatever was going on. So in the house, we still worked with the family on how to get along, how to unite, how to come together as a unit. And in these cases, how to come together as a unit in order to either integrate with this thing, or more likely, at least with the hauntings, how to get it out and keep it out. And
Okay.
so, yeah.
So you're a new therapist
Uh, well,
and
yeah, by that time, I had worked with gang members and their families and things like that. But that was in my training officially as like a marriage and family therapist. because
Okay.
I had by that time I had had 6 or 7 years in the field.
Okay. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
so I wasn't a brand new. I was like at a counselor level
Got it.
up until then, and then and I was receiving my sort of like therapy level training at that point. Yeah.
Okay. So I have to ask, when
Huh?
they told you that they believed that their house was haunted, and you responded how you did, which sounds
Uh-huh.
great because you didn't, oh, that's ridiculous, or oh my goodness, are you people crazy, or let me see if I can diagnose them with something.
Yeah.
What
Uh-huh.
what were you thinking in your mind? What were you thinking?
Well, at the time, I mean, what I was thinking was, okay, that this is the first time that something like this has been presented to me as
Right.
like the problem. Now, in my own history, I do have a history of this in my
Oh,
own
okay.
personal life. Now,
Okay.
I I don't talk about that often, um, my experience, but it was a dark entity
Okay.
uh, that I had experience with. So my openness to the paranormal was there.
Okay. So you
It
already
wasn't.
believed
Yes,
it was
I had
possible.
already. Well, I had already believed that that's a possibility. Now,
Okay.
what was
Yep.
also part of my experience in my career was I did work with people with schizophrenia and
Hmm.
um, psychotic disorders, and so that was also part of my training uh, up until that point in my career. And um, so I had what I think is kind of a balance, and I have it now. I think is this balance of there's psychotic disorders, and then there's also the paranormal, and so I
Yep.
was open to it. And as it turns out, with this um, particular family, I mean, there was a paranormal investigator group that I collaborated with at some levels, and a psychic medium that I collaborated with, and they were Catholic, and so a Catholic priest that was actually the one that came in at the end and cleaned the house and did all of that.
Mhm.
So I was open to that as a possibility of a way to work with a family. Yeah.
Okay. So were you the person who coordinated the paranormal team to come in and the priest and all of that? You were the one that did all that. Um,
Not directly
okay.
with that case. That was the
Okay.
first one, and so they were they were part of a um like a chat group back then, because this
Back in
is
the day.
2002, so they
Yep.
had they were doing chat room stuff, and they
Hmm.
were chatting with like other local families with hauntings and paranormal stuff going on.
Okay.
And that's actually how I then received other referrals, by the way,
Okay.
early on. So they're in these chat rooms, and so they were getting information from other people that had the same experience, what they did, and so that's how that happened. But I was encouraging of that because, as and you understand this as a LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, and also a marriage and family therapist, think this way. They do think about the system itself, the family members, but then also who else is around them,
Right. Hmm.
as to how to enhance the therapy and how to work with them. And so it made sense that I would collaborate with these other folks.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, at least on that first one, yeah, I was not initiating any of that. That was already in motion, and that I was the one that was kind of the addition, which was the family therapy part. And
Okay.
so in that instance, it turned out very well. They were able to get the entity out of the house, and because of the therapy and what they had worked on with each other, they were much closer. And at least my belief was, by the end, pretty robust against this thing ever being able to return.
Okay. So you as the therapist, your one of your roles was to help unite the family
Yes.
against this entity, against
Yes.
what was quote unquote really going on, according to what
Yes.
they had said to you. Okay.
Yeah, I know this is kind of like family therapy nerdy, but you know, they were in this triangle, this therapeutic triangle with this entity where once they banded together as a unit, then each one of them was in conflict with this entity, and then recruited other folks that weren't necessarily against them, but would help them get this thing out. And that's what, including me.
Mhm.
And then when you had this whole team of folks all all on the same side with the same kind of idea, along with the family, making again making them pretty robust against this thing being able to come back, because then they were a unit. It sort of starved this entity because it was no longer receiving all kinds of energy, negative energy from their arguments and their fighting
Yeah.
and all of that. And so so it weakened it, and then they got it out, and then as far as I know, they never returned.
So are you saying that this entity was trying to triangulate this family?
No, what I'm saying is I was thinking about it in terms of triangle theory, where how can we make sure that everyone's on the same team together
Got it.
against a common sort of enemy.
Okay.
Because when folks have a common enemy, so to speak, it often will strengthen their bond with each other if they have a common enemy. I mean, this
Mhm.
happens you know, in families. It happens in with entire societies, like
Right.
countries. You know,
Yep.
as if one country is acting out and two countries are in conflict, that will actually help those two countries alliance with each other
Right.
become even stronger.
Yeah. Did you find that with this family, or maybe some other families that you've worked with, that there are some people within the family unit that doesn't believe
Yes.
that this is paranormal, and then other ones
Yes.
are positive, or even maybe only some people in the family are experiencing it and the other ones are not?
Yeah, so I'm glad you bring that up, because my experience with this is that there's generally one person that may not be, by the time they get to me, there's one person
Mhm.
that is not sensing these things or seeing these things or believes these things.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem, is that when
Mhm.
all of them are seeing it, and when all of them, then it's easier for them to have an understanding that these things are happening. If there's
Right.
one naysayer, then there's conflict. And then what happens is the naysayer, especially if it's like a parent, then can drive underground the discussion around what these things are doing, what's happening for folks, right? Then it
Mhm.
becomes a secret, because it's no longer safe to talk about it openly, because the kids will get in trouble, or the
Yeah.
other parent
Yeah.
talking to the kids about this will get in trouble, because
Mhm.
the other person's like, this is all a bunch of crap and it's not happening, and stop making excuses and things like that. And so then those conversations become secret, and then all of a sudden, you know, it might be one parent who doesn't believe that these things are happening. The other parent is having conversations with the children about these things, trying to support the kids. And then all of a sudden, that other parent that doesn't believe becomes somewhat of an enemy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it creates negativity and negative energy in the house when you have a family divided,
Mhm.
and that's true for
Absolutely.
anything. But
Mm.
if you've got really scary, I mean, because paranormal activity in a household is frightening
Yeah.
for adults and for kids,
Mhm.
right? It's typically not Casper,
Yeah.
right?
It's not
So,
their dead grandma that we're talking
right,
about.
who's
It's-
scaring them. And so when you
yeah.
have 3 or 4 family members who are terrified, and you have one who's dismissing them completely, now we have fractures in that relationship too. So
Yeah. Absolutely.
we're getting into the
So
clinical piece too.
yeah, but so that's most of the work, right? Is
Mhm.
to how to help these fractured relationships become healed, or at least begin to start working at it, so that they can be a unit. And
Yeah.
what does happen occasionally, um, which really helps this process. It doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's really relieving. Is then the family member then starts to see this thing as well, like the black mist or a white mist or shadows moving around, and they're like, okay, well, okay, maybe there is something here. I'm not saying it's
Right.
a ghost. I'm not saying it's
Right.
some kind of negative energy, but I did see something, and so yeah, let's talk about this, and then they're finally open to it. And
Okay.
so for a lot of folks, though, it's very difficult for them to be able to believe something that they can't
Mhm.
see. Then
Right.
when
Or
they actually
touch.
see something, yeah, or touch,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. Yep.
But then when they actually see it, then like, oh, okay, well, maybe I need to rethink what
Yeah.
I've been saying all of this time, and usually that's very helpful. But the work that I do doesn't always require that everyone has to believe that there's some kind of spirit in the house,
Mhm.
because there also are problems in the house that we can, in family therapy, can help work on,
Mhm.
mistrust, and or if there's some kind of like an addiction issue, or some kind of problem between the parents or something like that, that all of those things can be worked at, that will relieve some of the pressure off of all of the family members, get them talking to one another. They
Mhm.
don't necessarily have to agree that this is paranormal. They don't.
Okay.
In order for them to make progress and change the environment of the house, so that there isn't all of this negative energy floating around. And then for some of these entities, whatever they are, when they're no longer able to feed off of some of that negative energy, they become weakened, and then they don't have as strong a hold on, a person or the family as a whole,
So
and
that's
sometimes they'll just go
interesting.
away. Yeah.
So, okay. So you're saying that there is a theory, or your experience has been that you've seen, is that
Hmm.
when there is negativity in a household, which all of us have negativity in our households, right? We are
Yeah.
not always our best self when we are at home with our family, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So not meaning to freak anybody out who's listening to this, but
Mhm.
I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about some really chronic, heavy duty negativity within a family, or at least within the location of that house. And then a family comes in, and now we're all interacting energetically,
Yeah.
right, with the household, within our family members, and things are escalating. Negativity is
Hmm.
escalating, right? So now we have negative energy that's pretty big. Have you seen any, is that one of the commonalities that you find working with families who are experiencing hauntings, is that there's chaos or heavy duty negativity within all of them? And
Yes.
if not, is there
Well,
other
yeah.
things that you see that's kind of a common,
Yeah.
okay.
My experience is, if they come to me, it's because there's all kinds of things going on in the family.
Yeah.
If they were a united family and they were just they were dealing with a negative entity, they probably wouldn't need me.
Right.
They need a spiritual, they need a Native American shaman, they need a medium who has experience in this. They don't need a family therapist. So when they come to me, it's because there's all kinds of trouble within the family itself.
Right.
And so that, in addition to having some kind of spirit or negative entity, or several of them in their house.
Okay. Have you noticed any connection between the period of adolescence and, okay, yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard that before, and it makes sense to me because the hormones are flying and things are changing, and there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of strong emotions. Many are negative with
Mhm.
teenagers. So you do see teenagers involved
Yeah,
quite a
I
bit?
see that. I see that frequently, where and in particular, if I'm naming it, that there's a medium in the house. That, and if the medium is also this 12, 13, 14-year old,
Mhm.
where all of these strong emotions, then it just it seems like a pattern where it's attracting these things to them. Now, not, I'm not saying it's like their fault. What I'm
Right.
saying is that they're just attractive to these, negative entities that can feed off of that, and that at least it seems like to me there's some manipulation of things in order to crank up that negative energy that a medium would put off, and
Yeah.
that feeds some of these things. So that's a pattern. There's like that pattern. Then there's patterns of kids messing around with Ouija boards and things like that.
Yeah.
That opens a doorway to these things, and then they
Hmm.
come in, and then it's hard to get them out.
Yeah.
Close that, get them out, and then close that doorway. I mean, there's all of those kinds of things that happen.
Hmm.
But what the focus of my work is to try to help them solve whatever problems they can with each other, how to get along as well as they can with each other, decrease the conflict in the house, increase the connection between family members, especially if one family member is kind of seen in that therapeutic triangle as like the enemy.
Yeah.
And how to bring that person, repair those fractures, bring that person back in, so that everyone is a united front. Therefore, after that, they have a much stronger chance of doing something about this and preventing it from coming back in. It's the same idea as in therapy, right? Family therapy is that family therapists work not just to solve the problem at hand so that everything's okay now, but how can we help the family work together as a unit well after they're no longer coming to family therapy,
Right.
so that they don't need family therapy, right?
Right. That's the goal. Yes,
Yeah.
that's the goal. And so one more follow-up question about maybe some of the common profiles or commonalities that you've seen with some of the families or
Mhm.
similarities. Do you notice, as an addiction counselor, do you notice that um, negative entities or some type of haunting is associated with a substance abuser in the house?
Yes. I think it plays into that idea that like a negative entity would take advantage of a weakness,
Hmm.
or what and I'm naming it as a weakness, that somebody is susceptible to something that is harmful to themselves and to the family around them. That's what I mean by weakness. And to play on that in order to drive the family members apart and crank up the negative energy that happens as a result. And a tool for that has been through substance use,
Hmm.
right? Now, I just had this discussion with a gentleman last Saturday on my own podcast, where he was describing, and I hadn't quite heard it like this before, where he was describing that the state of being that a person is in while they're intoxicated or high
Hmm.
actually makes that person more susceptible to a spiritual attachment and being able to be influenced by that
Yeah.
spirit. So if it's a negative one,
Hmm.
then to negatively influence that person.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't know. I just think that's fascinating, but it is a common aspect. Now, part of my problem is that it's not a problem, it's an occurrence, is that frequently people that come to see me because they're having troubles in their marriage, or they're having trouble as a couple, or they're having trouble as a family due to an addiction. That's just what they come to see me for,
Right.
not necessarily because there's a spirit in the house, because I'm an addictions counselor. And so that
Right.
happens. And so I'm used to that being part of the issue that families come in to see me for,
Yeah.
is some kind of substance abuse issue. And
Hmm.
so it just so happens that also is a strong part of what happens in these families with the hauntings, is there's some kind of substance use issue that's also happening.
Right.
Just they just go hand in hand.
Yeah. And so I don't know what your other guest had mentioned about substances weakening
Mhm.
um, the energetic field, because we all have an energy field, right?
Yeah,
It's the aura.
yeah,
The theory is that when we eat horribly, when we drink alcohol, when we're, ingesting poisons and toxic substances into our body, whatever that might be, it weakens our energy field.
Mhm.
and we can become more susceptible to a negative attachment or
Yes,
negativity in general, right?
yes,
When you don't
yes.
have a healthy, we always talk about like having a healthy body, like take care of yourself physically, work out, have a healthy emotional body, meaning go talk to a therapist or read self-help books. But we don't talk about how to strengthen and keep your spiritual, your energetic body healthy and
Mhm.
strong. And so that's a whole nother topic. But I think it's an interesting theory about how when people are chronically abusing alcohol or drugs, they can absolutely end up with an attachment because their energetic field is weakened because of what they're doing,
Yes,
what they're ingesting.
yes, that makes perfect sense. It happens over and over
Yep.
again.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what it is. They're more susceptible to this influence, whatever it is,
Right.
at
And that's
that
not to
level.
say that everyone who uses alcohol has an
Yeah.
attachment. That's not what we're saying, but it is a possibility and it's a theory that's out there for sure. Um, that
Well,
can
sure,
happen.
and it goes the other way too. It's not just negative. There are some substances that people ingest that make them more open or susceptible to like a positive influence as well. It just does that. But what
Mhm.
we're talking about is when it's in a negative way, right? To something that might be negative,
Yeah.
and that happens over and over. Yeah.
And I remember years ago I was studying under medium James Van Prague, who's he was
Uh,
back in the day kind of famous with, I think he's still famous, but he was on Larry King Live and Oprah and all that. And one of the things that James, when he talked about this topic, is he said some of the most haunted places are bars.
yeah.
You get a lot of people in the spirit world who were alcoholics who still like to hang out in those environments.
Hmm.
Right. And so it's just they sort of thrive on that drinking. We attract, we continue to do things that we like to do when we were in the physical. And
Uh-huh.
I thought that was really interesting. And so then, of course, you could leave a bar, you're drunk, have something attached to you or someone as
Yeah.
well. Mhm.
Uh-huh. Well, that makes
Interesting.
sense. And you'll see on the paranormal shows, they frequently will have, things fly off of the bar, you know,
Yep.
a glass or something,
Yeah.
because that energy is still there.
Right. And what does alcohol do to us? It's like the only drug that makes us violent. It's the only one. Heroin doesn't make us violent, but
Yeah.
alcohol does.
Yeah.
So when you have all that energetic imprint in those like locations, yeah, some crazy aggressive stuff could easily happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
So
do
that's
you
common. Yeah, that
yeah,
is
it
common.
is.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I never made that connection with looking at the paranormal shows, how many times they investigate a bar or a
Yeah.
hospital, or things, high
Hospitals are another
stress.
one.
I know, high
Yeah.
stress environments, energy is heightened. So do you have a case in your history that stands out to you that kind of haunts you, so to speak, or that I mean, I would imagine this type of work is super interesting and there's always something new, right? But is there something that sticks out to you where you're like, wow, whoa,
Well, there's the one I'm often asked the question of well, do I believe in some of these things? And I say, well, yes, but it's not always. I go, I have probably close to 5% of my referrals total are paranormal.
okay,
But of that 5%, what I say is that it's about 3% of my work is paranormal, and that's because 2%, or like 40% of the referrals I get may not really be paranormal. It might be something else. And like
yeah,
somebody's lives in an old house and they're hearing things, or um, it's schizophrenia or some kind of psychotic disorder.
yeah,
Although that does also happen with hauntings as well. But one irrefutable experience that I have, that I'm like, look, there is no denying this one. This one absolutely I knew was paranormal. Is that it was a haunted house case, family therapy, and so I'll just I don't know how much of this is going to be on. We might have to edit this part out.
hey,
I don't know how much of what we're doing is going to be like on a video and how much is on here, but um, I use chairs. Family therapists like me are use chairs. We don't use couches. And the reason being is like structural family therapy. You want to be able to move around chairs and things. But I'm sitting right here in a rotating chair. This is the only one. The rest are
Yep.
fixed. And so I rarely sit in this chair. And so years ago, I had a family where there was poltergeist activity where the things were moving around on their own, voices and everything, like everything. It wasn't just the girl who's a medium, by the way, or a budding medium. But all of the family members were seeing these things. This was happening on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And they were explaining, they had to explain to me, how these things were moving around. And, it was interesting. I was like, okay, but it wasn't anything that I hadn't heard before. So we're sitting in our circle of chairs. And like I said, I'm not sitting in this rotating chair. I was sitting in a regular chair. And we're just talking. And I think this is true. We were talking about the Broncos, the Denver Broncos, and just kind of bullshitting around and having a good time, checking in. And then all of a sudden, we weren't talking about anything paranormal. Then all of a sudden, my rotating chair just starts to spin around. And I look over at it and I was like, and it startled me. I was like, holy sheesh.
Yeah.
My chair is moving by itself. And this family was not phased at all. Not even a little bit. Like
You're like, oh no.
I know I was
I'm
over there
the scared
out, and they're
one.
just like whatever. And the girl, the daughter, got upset with me. She said, "For Christ's sake, what the hell have you been listening to? We've been telling you that this happens this whole time." And I was like, well, yeah, but it didn't happen right in front of me. I mean, I was just listening to your stories. And so that's the one instance where it was irrefutable what was happening to them was happening. Like it actually happened in my office. And so
Right. So
that one probably stands out the most.
understandably so. But interestingly enough, they're coming and talking about all these experiences in the home, and yet they bring it
They
to
brought
your
it with them.
office.
Yeah.
So which is also more evidence that spirits and people in the spirit world or a poltergeist type activity can follow the family members.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't have to stay in that one location. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. I have this, I think you and I have talked about this before, but I have this sort of unofficial rating system of people and how sensitive they are to the spiritual realm or to energy. And I'm like a regular old dude. I'm a 5 out of 10, nothing special, no extra sensitivity. It's like full-blown mediums like yourself are like a 9 or a 10 out of 10 on this unofficial scale that I have. But even regular old dudes like me, when folks bring this stuff with them, these haunted house cases, when they bring this stuff with them, especially the negative, nasty ones, even I can tell when they come inside the office.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy cow, you brought something with you, or because it's the same feeling for me, or they just had a fight.
Yeah, and you can feel it.
To me, yeah, I can feel that. It's the exact same feeling, and I can't tell the difference between the two.
Yeah.
Whereas other people can, because I'm not a 0. I'm not like a 0 out of 10.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like a 5 or something. And even I can tell it. And then when they leave, it goes with them too. Right. And then they leave and you're like, whew, oh, wow. I went, I feel like I, just lost 50 pounds. I feel a whole lot lighter right now.
Yeah. So that's an important thing to point out too. It's a feeling. you
Uh-huh.
don't necessarily see it. I know you saw the chair spinning, but
Yeah, I
I think
saw
this is
that.
important for people to, yeah, for people to know is that many times it's a feeling. You can be talking to someone, maybe just one individual, and you're like, oh, yeah, because their
Uh,
vibe, and there could be, who knows, maybe they don't feel well, maybe they just got in a fight with their spouse, maybe there is something attached to them, but we all know, we've all met people like that. Then you
yeah,
can be around somebody else on the opposite end who's just so positive and happy, and you end up feeling good around them. That's
yeah,
energy. I always tell
yeah,
people that's you sensing their energy. That's all that is. That's your
yeah.
intuition. And you
Uh-huh.
might not know anything. Did they get in a fight or not? But you just feel it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's very real. We need to pay attention to those feelings because that's communicating to us something really important. It is.
Yeah, and I think and you know this very well, and I think it's good for people to think about it, is some people already have this ability to be able to sense that energy,
Mhm.
and then others, and myself included, I believe I can learn how to be more attuned to
Sure.
that kind of energy. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people can, if not everyone, can learn
Right.
to be. Now they may never get to like your level, like a 10 out of 10 in this like scale that I have. But they might be a little more sensitive, like they
For
might be
sure.
a little more attuned to that energy and what that might mean, and
Right.
how to to work with that. And I think everyone can be trained at some level with that. A
Mhm.
belief that I have is like for I don't know if you're familiar with emotionally focused therapy.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, EFT, is that in their training, they're training to attune to people's emotions.
Mhm.
um, but a belief that I have is that they also inadvertently are training themselves to their energy as well,
Yeah.
to be able
Yeah.
to kind of sense that and match that. I
Mhm.
know for certain, Reiki masters, they absolutely are attuning to that energy and being able to feel that, and
Mhm.
help others who are also talented in that way to also be able to do that. But then there's like the regular old folks like me that can improve on that. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably something that I would do, just for myself at
Yeah.
some point, just to be higher tuned. And I think it would probably in some ways help me as a therapist.
Absolutely, it would. It
Yeah.
absolutely would, because that's you're constantly looking at nonverbal communication, right?
Uh-huh.
In addition to what they're saying, but you're looking at everything else too.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. So I wanted to ask another follow-up question about like this family that left, right? And you were like, whoa, I felt like I just lost 50 pounds.
Uh-huh.
So that made me wonder, like, how do you or do you protect yourself? How do
Hmm.
you protect your energetic self? What kind of energetic boundaries do you have? Because we both know, even as therapists, we have to have those, and we need to, we're working with difficult situations, possibly difficult clients throughout the day. How do you manage that when you have, you're working with someone, especially in a paranormal situation? How do you protect yourself? What are some of the things
Well,
you
what
do?
I do an awful lot of prayer. When now sometimes I don't always know when this is coming into my office.
Sure, right.
But when I do, I am aware of it's a haunted house case or something like that. I pray consistently before, the night before,
Yeah.
just before they walk in, and then
Mhm.
afterwards.
Yep.
I pray and ask for protection and guidance in what I'm doing, and so that becomes a regular part. Now, one of the things that you know I and my family, what we have to get better at is protecting our home, because occasionally some of these things will follow me, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And the negative ones usually, even the negative ones will probably usually respond well to my own authority.
Yeah.
uh to you can't come in here, you can't be, you're not allowed here.
Right.
um
Right.
and then uh there can be additional things that can also protect. I'm a huge fan of my own faith, and how that I draw a lot of energy, positive energy,
Mhm.
through that, and I think part of that positive energy then is protective,
Yes.
not just like a blessing or something from the Lord, but also just this positive thinking and doing the best that you can in order to be as much light when something that might be darker is trying to
Absolutely.
come in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just so important to incorporate that into our work, as therapists, regardless, but also
Yeah.
when you're working directly with the spiritual realms, to never forget to protect yourself. Never
Yeah.
forget. Yeah.
Yeah.
So are there any final thoughts that you might have or that you would want people to know about your work, or anything
Well,
that you would
yes.
want to add?
Yeah. The thing that is one of the things that's important to me, I don't know if it's like categorized as the most important, but is very important to me in this work is the collaboration between the psychotherapeutic community, family therapy in particular,
Mhm.
with the paranormal community and being
Yeah.
able to collaborate with each other. It's a huge deal to me that folks start talking to each other. And
Yes.
part of what I'm trying to do is to help paranormal folks to talk to spiritual folks, which I think they will do. But then for psychotherapeutic folks to talk to the paranormal folks, to the mediums, to the Native American shamans, to the Catholic priests, to the paranormal investigators, so that they're all working together,
Yeah. Yeah.
sharing information. They're all on the same team. Because now, what I'm talking about are when these entities are negative. That'll be
Mhm.
very important that there's a team behind the family, along with the family itself,
Yeah, for
all
sure.
doing the same thing to get this thing out or take care of it or protect the family, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's important. But then there's also just the greater paranormal community, which isn't just these negative entities. It's also, mediums being able to communicate with the spirits of dead loved ones, and being able to heal
Yeah.
relationships. And I know that's part of what you do.
Mhm.
Um, a new thing that I have started to do with a colleague of mine, Shannon Keneally, is she is a medium. She's like you. She is a medium and an LCSW,
Yep.
and is for her to be able to fully immerse herself in a family therapy session as a medium, and that I just do the family therapy, but then we do that family therapy so that she can fully being immersed in the mediumship that she does,
Mhm.
not have to worry about the family therapy part, that I will do that, and then
Right.
she work with her in the session with the family in order to do that. So we just started doing that, and it's been pretty darn cool. But that's that
Mhm.
collaboration, with each other, so that we can help families.
Mhm.
So I
Absolutely.
think that, the more that it's talked about, the more open folks will be. There obviously are naysayers, and
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
folks that don't believe in this, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think as time progresses, and as we talk more and more about it, and I want to make sure people are talking about this and doing this, that the barriers that might have prevented some healing in families uh, can be broken down and actually work, even if the loved one has passed away,
Oh,
that
for
there's
sure.
still some work that can be done, as
Yep.
unusual as that might sound.
Yeah. No, I mean, as a medium and a therapist myself, that's kind of how my private readings go
Yeah.
anyways. But interestingly enough is, and maybe you've seen this in your work with Shannon. I mean, I do it more on the private
Yeah.
one-on-one individual, because I don't do couples counseling and I don't do family therapy. I do
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah.
But we're still who we are when we pass away.
Yeah.
It's not like we grow angel wings and know the secrets to the universe. We're still who we are, but we are also growing and changing and evolving and learning lessons and taking accountability. And there is no specific time frame, like, oh well, they've been gone, for us, they've been dead 6 months, so he should be at this point in time. No, that's irrelevant, right? But what I've seen too is that even people in the spirit world, just like in a classic therapy session, might not be ready to say they're sorry yet. They might not
Yeah.
be ready to take accountability. They might still be, processing what they did. So it's very interesting. It's healing because they showed up, right?
Yes.
It's healing because they showed up, but it's also a process too. So we can't, there are no guarantees of, the client coming in getting what they want. We would hope for that, but it's, people are still where they're at, even outside of the body, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
So,
and how wonderful the work is now. As I'm working more and more with mediums in this way, like you and
mhm,
I talking now, because previously my work with mediums has been, okay, so what can I learn from you about what's going on with the spirit? Here's
mhm,
what's happening with the family that
right.
might be helpful for whatever you're doing as a medium. That was my relationship for years with mediums.
Yeah.
Now I'm interviewing mediums because I'm so fascinated with this. I mean, it is so fun for me to finally be able to, because in my professional relationship with folks, with mediums, it was never appropriate, at least that I thought, that I should ask them like some of the questions that I get to ask you, or that we talk about in, like podcasts and stuff.
Mhm,
Like, how do you know that something's a spirit, and
right.
and things like that. Now I get to ask all those questions.
Yeah.
And what I've been thinking about over the last year or so, it's like, why didn't I just do this anyway? I mean, I should have been doing this because it's so interesting and so fun. And I think people are interested in it as well. It's
Mhm,
not just me that's interested in
right.
it. People want to know, okay, when mediums are able to do these things, what is it that they're able to sense, and what messages, and like that wonderful story that you told me about, how your grandfather, because he loves you and loves your grandma and loves your family, absolutely made sure that he did not come across to you at the beginning
Yeah.
as something. It was your glitter.
Yep.
It
Yep.
had to come across like that, so that it was gentle, and that's what a loving ancestor would do, to
Right.
come across. And I'm just fascinated with that
Mhm.
sort of stuff,
Yeah.
because my experiences have been, up until more recently, um that the negative spirits are intentionally scaring people. They're
Yes.
they're trying to make them scared, because that cranks
Mhm.
up that negative energy in the room. And
Right.
so it's really nice to hear from mediums and be able to talk to them about these, real positive experiences. And I'm just fascinated with it, and
Yeah.
hope that this encourages more people with abilities like yours to be able to develop that and further help, people in need.
Yeah, yeah. And there is so much more to the paranormal world than the scary, spooky stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's real, and that's what the shows tend to focus on because
yeah,
that's the show. But there is more to it, and there's healing that can come in many different forms. Therapeutic, um, private mediumship session that I do,
yeah,
the work that Shannon and you are doing. So there's all different types. There's all different types, and for people who are maybe hadn't listened to the podcast that I did on Darin's podcast, he's referring to the first time I saw a story I shared with him, the first time I saw someone in spirit, which was my grandfather, and I was a little
mhm,
kid. And the first thing I saw was this beautiful, like purple glitter that was just going around and around. It was very mesmerizing. And my grandfather emerged from that. And I know now that from, working with spirit in the way that I do for as long as I have, that my grandfather did that because he did not want to just show up. It would have frightened me, probably traumatized me as a child.
yeah,
He eased his way in to not make me afraid using that purple glitter. So it was actually a very beautiful experience. So that's what he's talking about.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it was just so lovely talking to you, Darin. And I mean, seriously, I could probably talk to you for hours and hours and hours. I'm so grateful that I met you all
Uh-huh.
those years ago, and so grateful that you came on my podcast. And I know I'm going to have you back. I know I
Oh, good.
will.
Yeah,
We'll keep this
yeah, I'd
going.
love to talk. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I just want to sign off and thank everyone for joining us today. And thank you again, Darin.
Well, thank you so much for having me and allowing me to use this platform to be able to communicate this connection between the paranormal and family therapy and therapy in general. Yeah, so I
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.
Bye.